For my ISU, I will be analyzing one of the most controversial yet one of the best books, according to the New York Times, Lolita, by Vladimir Nabokov. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia in 1955, he studied at Trinity College in Cambridge and later launched his literary career in Berlin, Paris. In 1940, he moved to the United States where he achieved renown as a novelist, poet, critic, and translator. He wrote many novels such as Pale Fire in 1962, Penin in 1957, and his best-known piece, Lolita, 1955. Nabokov later died in 1977 in Montreux, Switzerland. Nabokov wrote Lolita over a period of 5 years, finally finishing the novel on December 6, 1953. Various publishers refused to publish Lolita because they thought it was repulsive and corrupt. Until September 15, 1955, Lolita was published by the Olympia Press in Paris. The novel is about the memoir of Humbert, who went by the pseudonym of Humbert Humbert. He tells his story from the beginning, his upbringing to his first love, Annabelle, who has a great impact on Humbert. We then follow him into adulthood, where we learn about his dark, twisted life and fantasies. We learn about his obsession with young girls early on in the novel. Humbert is an individual that has a way with words which really defies his character. He moves to America for a teaching position at an all-girls school. He lives with the Days family. He shares a house with a mother, Charlotte, and a daughter, Dolores. He becomes sexually attracted to Dolores, which he calls Lolita, and soon falls in love with her. He agrees to marry Charlotte Hayes to become closer to Lolita. When Charlotte dies after an incident, Humbert takes Lolita on a road trip and continually rapes her. Lolita believes she too is in love with Humbert. However, she then realizes that she is no longer attracted to him, and she creates mischief. Lolita took place in the United States in the late 1940s to mid-1950s. Because sexuality was such a big part of Lolita, I found it important to focus on the attitudes towards sexuality in America in the 1950s. Traditionally, attitudes about sex began to change during the 1950s. Although many Americans clung to the moral ideas about sexuality, they could not suppress questions that began to raise about what constituted normal to abnormal sexual behavior. Influences like Marilyn Monroe and Playboy magazines flaunted their sexuality and intrigued the public. This novel shocked readers, thinking it was taboo and inappropriate. Although this novel is viewed as romanticized, Nabokov states that this novel is supposed to be a tragedy. This novel is about the protagonist, Humbert Humbert. He refers to us readers as the jury because he is telling his story from jail and wants to use his language to seduce and manipulate readers into thinking he is a sympathetic pedophile. Throughout the novel, Humbert refers to nymphets. Here is a clear description of what Nabokov describes nymphets as.
Nymphet, a nymph-like or sexually attractive young girl. 1955, V. Nabokov, Lolita.
Between the age limits of 9 and 14, there occur maidens who, to certain bewitched travellers, twice or many times older than they, reveal their true nature, which is not human but nymphic, that is, demoniac. And these chosen creatures I propose to designate as nymphets. Between those age limits, are all girl children nymphets? Of course not. Otherwise, we who are in the know, we lone voyagers, we nympholettes, would have long gone insane. You have to be an artist and a madman, a creature of infinite melancholy, with a bubble of hot poison in your loins and a super-voluptuous flame permanently aglow in your subtle spine. Oh, how you have to cringe and hide, in order to discern at once, by ineffable signs, the slightly feline outline of a cheekbone, the slenderness of a downy limb, and other indices which despair and shame and tears of tenderness forbid me to tabulate. The little deadly demon among the wholesome children. She stands unrecognized by them and unconscious herself of her fantastic power.
This is Lolita, the main nymphet in the novel. This is a picture just to show you how young she truly is. And this is Humbert Humbert, just to give you an idea of how old he truly is. I know how wrong you think this is, but this is because Humbert is a pedophile, and Lolita is unaware of how wrong the situation is. In Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, the protagonist, Humbert Humbert, fetishes young girls he calls nymphets. If Humbert is aware that his desires are immoral, why does he still act on them? Humbert is incapable of controlling his desires because he is a diagnosed pedophile. Humbert is reminded too much of his past love, Annabelle, which pushes him to fulfill his desires. I focused on this novel through the psychoanalytical and gender and sexuality lens. Leave me alone in my pubescent park, in my mossy garden. Let them play around me forever. Never grow up. It is evident that Humbert was incapable of controlling his desires. At the beginning of the book, he seems to not act on his fantasies, but to observe nymphets from far without harming them. However, he did have an experience with a prostitute. When he found out that she wasn't nymphet enough for him, he lost interest and told her to leave. This shows that Humbert has no sexual attraction to anyone but nymphets. Every movement she made in the dapple sun plucked at the most secret and sensitive chord of my abject body. This is the start of Humbert displaying his attraction to Lolita. As he moved into their home, he watches her from afar and studies her every move. He fantasizes about her and becomes aroused whenever she is around. Humbert cannot control his desires, and soon enough, he is incapable to control his actions. As he becomes sexually active with Lolita, he is unable to stop and does everything in his power to keep her. Eventually, in a way, she starts to control him by demanding more allowance and telling him which date to go to next. He complies with her wishes in exchange for her sexual favors. However, he too becomes obsessive. He sets strict rules for Lolita, such as no boys, no talking to strangers, no leaving the house when he is not around. This shows a shift in his mentality from a low-key pedophile towards Lolita to a submissive predator. Here's a clip from the movie to show you how abusive Humbert gets.
Look, Lo, this has got to stop. I don't know what it is you're up to, but whatever it is, I'll yank you out of Beardsley as fast as it takes me to pack a suitcase unless this stops.
Unless what stops?
You know what I'm talking about!
Take it easy, mister.
Now, you show me every penny you
Leave me
got.
alone, you pervert!
You're running away from me. I know what you're
Yeah,
doing.
that's
I
right,
know what
I
you're
am!
doing.
Anyone would try to run away from
You show me everything you've hidden.
I earned that money! Go ahead, murder me. Murder me like you murdered my mother.
I'm sorry.
I believe that although Humbert understands that he is wrong for fetishing nymphets, he cannot help himself and decipher his actions due to the fact that he is a pedophile. The medical definition of pedophilia, per the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is a post-pubescent person who has a sexual preference towards pre-pubescent children, which is basically someone who has a sexual interest in minors. Does Humbert's young romantic experience with Annabelle impact him to fetish young girls? Annabelle Lee, Humbert's first childhood love. Despite having many physical encounters, Humbert and Annabelle are unable to further their adolescent love. She later dies of typhus. Humbert remains obsessed with her memory until he meets Lolita. I believe that Annabelle strongly had an impact on the fact that Humbert is obsessed with Lolita. He sees Annabelle in Lolita, which comforts him. Losing your first love to death can traumatize an individual. Not being able to commit a sexual act may have impacted the obsession for Humbert, making him determined to fulfill the act with someone who reminds him of Annabelle. Lolita clearly had no sense of agency in this situation. She had no control over her body or actions. Her whole life belonged to Humbert. She was submissive to Humbert. This is because she had nowhere else to go. She had no family or friends to take care of her. Humbert was all she knew. I leaf again and again through these miserable memories and keep asking myself, was it then, in the glitter of that remote summer, that the rift in my life began, or was it my excessive desires for that child only the first evidence of an inherent singularity? Humbert admits that Annabel may have been the source of his pedophilia. When he first is introduced to Lolita, Humbert is immediately overpowered by passionate feelings. He imagined that Lolita is the reincarnation of Annabel. He describes his love for Lolita as innocent by identifying it with his childhood love for Annabel. Although Humbert knew that he was wrong for loving Lolita the way he did, it is evident that there are factors that played into it, such as his sick pedophile mind and his traumatic experience with his first love as a child. Although this book was meant as a tragedy and was meant for us to hate Humbert, his manipulative and cunning language makes us readers, or jury, have an understanding for him.